So today we are basically releasing state of the EV report on the state of charging in India. And we have a very esteemed panel today. We have what we call people from policy, from WRI, from CEEW. We have investment banking from Vasudha. We have two founders, Akhil and Naeem, who are from hardware and software side both. So I think before starting, it will be great if I think we can start a little introduction by each of us, probably a small two-line introduction. I will start from you, Chaitanya.
Hi, sure. I'm Chaitanya. I lead the e-mobility work at WRI India, and WRI India is a environmental research organization. We work on various aspects of sustainability, including urban transport and urban development. And within the urban transport sector, we look at electric mobility, not just urban transport. Now, increasingly, we're looking at freight and all as well. So across sustainable mobility, we look at electric mobility as one of the key pathways for a decarbonized transport sector in India. And our work has, on the EV charging front especially, has looked at both the national policy side engagements as well as engagements with
Just a second, I think. Sorry.
No, that's all right. Both national side engagements with the Ministry of Power, Niti Aayog, and others that are looking at the charging ecosystem, as well as working with DISCOMs and state nodal authorities and CPOs in terms of spatial planning and business modeling for charging infrastructure, both in cities and along highways. So happy to be here.
Thanks, Chaitanya. And Vasudha.
Yeah, hi. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yeah, hi. Hi, everyone. My name is Vasudha Raghavan. I am an investment banker by profession with about 22 years of experience now. For the last almost 10 years, I've been running my independent investment banking firm. And we were the first ones to start focusing on electric mobility way back in 2016-17. And we've done some of the notable deals in India in terms of fundraising and M&A. Including the acquisition of Ampere Vehicles by Green Cotton, which was India's very first M&A deal in the electric two-wheeler space, and second overall after the Mahindra Reva acquisition. In addition to that, we've helped several companies across the EV ecosystem raise early stage and growth stage capital, including OEMs, software, battery management systems, energy efficiency devices, and so on. So really, and including fleets, of course. Fleets is a very large focus area for us as, as more and more of the applications-based adoption is happening, which is, use case-based adoption of electric mobility is happening. We've kind of been looking at some of these areas. So that's really the focal point of our work. We of course also look at the broader decarbonization space and have been instrumental in getting lots of notable global investors into the country as first-time investors into the decarbonization and electric mobility ecosystem. I'm based out of Bangalore.
Thanks,
nice
so I think every EV deal is happening in India. Probably Vasudha might be in the know or might have done it. So don't put that in context. Now we have Amin. Amin is running a very interesting startup called Tron EV. Amin, if you can give a two-line intro of yours.
Sure. Hello. Hi, everyone. My name is Amin. I'm the co-founder and CEO at Flextron. Flextron is an electric vehicle charging technology company. We manufacture electric vehicle chargers like a 3.3 kilowatt, 7.5 kilowatt. These are your conventional chargers. We have more than 15,000 of these installed across the country through various CPOs. Our core business is into rapid charging. We build electric vehicle technology that enables us to fast charge electric vehicles in about 10 minutes. We come from an extensive background and experience in the charging infrastructure space, understanding the hardware supply chain across EV chargers in the country. And right now, we're focusing predominantly on building charging infrastructure first and then deploying fast charging batteries for last mile delivery and gig workers. Yeah.
Great, great. And then we have very interesting profile, Priyansh. Priyansh run a very popular blog called Experience with EV. I will say he's the one who is from the customer voice. So we all of the investor, entrepreneur, and what you call policy makers. But there's a guy who has really first hand, pulse on the ground. So Priyansh, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Shailesh, and thank you for inviting me for this session. So, as you mentioned, right, I run a blog called EXP with EVs, where I document experiences of driving around the country. But outside of that, what I've also started doing is I've started looking at infrastructure growth, mainly CCS2 and Type 2, in the country, and I've been documenting it for over 2 years now. So I've been counting each charger, been making notes about it, and putting it out in the public as to what is happening and what everyone in the industry should be aware about.
Great, great. Thanks to have you here. Now, next we have Seshadri Raghavan, who is joining in from US. Seshadri, yeah, if you can give it 1 minute intro.
Thanks, Shailesh. Thanks, Shailesh. Thanks to Climate Angels. Happy to be here. I'm Sesha Raghavan, Program Lead, Sustainability at the Council on Energy, Environment and Water. As a program lead, I work on cross-cutting EV transition, infrastructure, and other self-contained topics ranging from user behavior to all the way up to fleet decarbonization. I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Now, last but not the least is Sumit Agrawal. He's a director of AEEE, Smart Decision Power, and I think he has been tracking EV space since the first kit came on the ground, right? So, Sumit, thanks for joining us. It's great if you can give us a small intro.
Thanks, Shailesh. So, good afternoon and good evening to everyone who are here. So, I'm Sumedh, and I have been in development sector from last decades. As Shailesh mentioned that I work and lead the mobility practice at AEEE. It's a not-for-profit research-based organization that focuses on energy efficiency as one of the levers and primary lever for sustainable development. So decarbonization is something which we fully support, and electrification of transport sector definitely reduces emission. So with that merit, I am here to happy to learn from the panelists as well as share our experiences of that matter. Thank you so much, Sharon.
So thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for your time. So I will start, I think, jump in the first bigger question which everybody has on the mind is like, say, everybody, when we talk about EV, everybody says charger kahan hai, right? Where are the chargers? Where there is charging infra? You go to government, they say, oh, there's no charging infra. We are trying to build it up. And you go to every CPO, the utilization rate is not even teens, right? It is into 1%, 2%. I met one very large company and their utilization rate was 0.5%, right? And they have deployed close to 8,000 chargers. So it's a very different paradox, right? So I will start from reverse, like, Sumit, what do you think? Why is that happening?
So, Shailesh, so there are three things, like three L's, I should say. One is law, land, and then legal. So generally, land is an issue which comes whenever it comes the location part. The rentals are pretty high. Then the legal part, where you have delay in either getting approvals from utility sector or subsidies, is again an issue. And then comes the uh, law part. So I'm just trying to mention that these are the aspects which definitely deters and make the business case a bit challenging for any new person to come and invest and also remain for a longer period of time. So that is the issue, and it's kind of a cohesive system. I mean, it does not only depend on the EV, but it also comes on the EV charging infrastructure. So I guess these are the aspects which we should think about and take forward. Yeah.
God. So now, so law, I think, yeah, law, land, and legal. Very interesting point. Now, Chaitanya, like, say, you have been advising governments, right? And I think we are very, very involved with the Delhi government also in setting the EV policy. So what is your take? Where we are stuck?
Thanks, Shailesh. I mean, I don't know where to start essentially. I think there's so many reasons. Of course, land and, why there is no single window. That's why it is slow to set up chargers. That is one thing on the supply side. But I think the paradox that you're talking about is for a couple of reasons. One is a bunch of players came in and invested in the charging infrastructure networks because they saw it as a long game. Nobody expected to make money in the beginning. They all know that the EV market is heading towards growth and they wanted to be the first players, first movers in order to get network dominance. Secondly, the entry barriers for charging infrastructure companies to come up are very low because the whole de-licensing happened, which was a good thing, which actually helped in the proliferation of infrastructure. You have a lot of different charging operators. You have very fly-by-night small operators also, many people who think, oh, we'll start a business in charging and make money. And then you have big players as well. And over time, this is going to consolidate, obviously, and that's already started. I mean, a bunch of folks would have come and gone. We might not even have heard about it, but that means there is a huge fragmentation in the ecosystem today. And you would have heard this common refrain across every EV blog, article, etc., that everyone needs to, as an EV user, you need to like install like 30 apps in order to make one long distance journey just by stitching together different networks in order to actually ensure you have charge along the way.
Correct.
So the low utilization comes partly from that, from the fact there is no unified ecosystem in which a user, like all demand and all supply, can be matched more efficiently, number one. And number two, a lot of charging players are setting up for the long game. So that's on the supply side and why there is low utilization. Now on the demand side, given that we are talking about a whole new transport infrastructure, rolling it out across a country as vast as India, as fragmented, and currently with such low margins, there are still huge areas without charging. So the highway charging is starting up and has been starting up for maybe the past year or two and is now picking up speed. But up to then, there was only some charging, public charging in cities, and the highway charging was entirely missing. And so, especially for four-wheeler users and everything, this was becoming a major challenge. So that's the reason that I think for an EV user who is used to the sort of convenience of fuel pumps and fuel stations everywhere, this lack of charging, even if they did not need it, became a psychological barrier and sort of prevented a bunch of people from buying EVs, saying we'll wait until the charging infrastructure network is ready. And then, of course, the third thing is there's a mismatch sometimes of where people need charging and where charging is available. Some of the first charging installations, especially in cities, especially those done by PSUs and all, came up where land was available and not necessarily where the demand was. And you would know that in the most high traffic commercial areas and cities and all, the demand may be high, but land may not be available. And so you may actually have chargers in peripheral areas or in industrial areas where the land availability is there. So that is the third reason where there may be a mismatch where, the location, there is charging, but it's not at the locations where it's needed. And again, it leads to this conception that there is no charging. It's a little bit of truth on all sides, essentially.
So you are saying that there's a charging, but not so much profit thin margin. And now, so let me bring in Akhil from Pulse Energy, who's a startup trying to solve all these issues, right? So probably, I think, Akhil, you have heard the question, right, about the paradox. That while everybody complain of charging infra, the CPOs are struggling. So, just give you a small introduction of yours and then tell what you think of this paradox.
Sure. Thank you, Shailesh, and thanks to Climate Angels for having me on this forum. So just an introduction, my name is Akhil. I'm one of the co-founders at Pulse Energy. I've in fact interacted with almost half of the panelists here, or in the past 5 years that I've been in this market. What we do, and I'll answer the question by kind of mapping it to what we do as a business, right? So we fundamentally help fleet operators access multiple charging networks through our platform. So the biggest consumers of public chargers in India today are fleets, commercial segment vehicles. We end up solving the biggest problem that Chaitanya just said, which is you're going to have to stitch multiple apps together to even access these charging networks. We help solve for that. It's a very small problem, but has a bigger repercussions on utilization, accessibility, all of that. So when you look at the paradox piece, see, there are two trends that I typically look at. In us Indians, we are value seekers. We will go towards a charger that has the cheapest rate. Like in cities, that is what we end up seeing. Be it a fleet, be it retail, you will end up doing that. It's a conscious decision that just we innately do. So anyone who's offering a better rate, they will end up doing it. Like for example, we manage all of charging for Bescom. Bescom sells for 7 rupees or 6.7 rupees per unit.
So
They
what
don't
is their inflation?
They're extremely high. Like I get complaints about, people aren't.
So can you give a number or you can't? Like
I
say
can't give you a number.
above 20, below 20, just to give us a hint.
It's a great utilization. It's a great utilization, but the problem is, are they making money? Because they're selling it at cost. Like the cost of electricity with no GST is what is Bescom doing, right? Like because they're not looking at this as a profit center. They're looking at it as hey, this is a government funded project. We've got to give the lowest rate possible. And there are lines that are there at those charging stations. So
just to again, like say, is utilization above 50% or below 50%?
I won't be able to answer that. Sorry. It's Bescom's data.
I want to know what does when you say great means, right?
So think of it as it's good utilization.
Okay.
You can look at you can in fact actually file an RTI to get that data. Since it's a public company, you can file an RTI to get that data. I'm not licensed to give that information out. Simple as that.
Got it.
But
No.
just to close the loop on this, utilization is there in cities in some of those public chargers. In highways, I don't see such a high utilization happening, but at least on the fleet perspective, some of the chargers in cities like Mumbai, Delhi, Hyderabad, Bangalore, you are seeing good utilization, which is roughly around 20-25% on chargers. You're seeing that.
Got it. So okay, so that is happening. So again, I mean, you are doing what you call you are saying that okay, we need not even put a DC charger. We can use the battery, charge the vehicle, right, and deploy the on-demand charging. What is your take?
Right. I think for if you're using battery integrated DC chargers to charge electric vehicles, there are some challenges. Fundamental challenges are it makes sense if it's integrated with, let's say, solar, or if you're able to store or borrow energy at a lower cost and then give it at a higher cost. But where it actually adds up is that in charger supply chain, right? Like Akhil was mentioning earlier, that margins are very thin. Now, if a CPO has to install a charger, you look at the stakeholders in the supply chain. So where you have a manufacturer, then you have a financer, and then you have a CPO who does the software, and then you have the landlord. Everyone needs to get a piece of the 8 rupees or 12 rupees per unit that you actually sell. So breaking even on these chargers becomes really difficult if you're going to invest on the charger and then you invest on another grid upgrade, which essentially costs you 2 to 3 lakh rupees. So if you're able to store energy without a grid upgrade and then sell the electricity back at a relatively higher cost, then you will be able to break even and build something that could be more sustainable. But from what we are seeing right now, the grid is becoming a problem as the ecosystem grows. A lot of places in Bangalore, there is real estate, there is capital, but there is no availability of grid, which is becoming a challenge.
Got it. So, Seshadri, on this, coming to you, because you have been advising a lot of governments, do you think this grid is becoming a big issue? What is your take on this grid issue?
If I may, I'll just also like to add like two more L's. One is a lack of data on what's actually happening on the ground in terms of whether it's utilization, demand curve, or anything pertaining to it's a black box. And the other L is this lack of coordinated planning, which probably other panelists have also talked to in terms of misalignment between supply, I mean the supply and demand, which are driven by the the land and the cost and all those things. This issue of grid, I would say it is tied to what sort of right now the EV transition is impacted, let's say driven by two-wheelers and three-wheelers, which you can get away with, what I call like 7 or less kilowatt charging tops. For AC, at that pace, at that charging rate, you are not looking to, burden the by significant. It's not going to necessitate a huge grid upgrade. At best, you would require reinforcement. It's like some upgraded MCBs and so on. That's about it. But when you're talking DC, this is where the grid becomes a complex issue. And based on the current market trends, especially we are talking four-wheelers, and let's say buses and trucks also, let's say for the most part, let's say four-wheelers, and they are in sparse geographies. So we could pretty much trace out like where like the kind of buyers of four-wheelers, let's say if you're talking major metros. And this again as a competing objective of, when we are talking urban landscape of India, land is a premium. More importantly, like the amount of time it us to get the discom to get the supply at that particular voltage and current level, it's going to take forever. And the when we say grid, I would like to break it into two parts. One is the on-site infrastructure that you would need to. We are talking, let's say, a transformer or a compact substation. But there is also this upstream that we are talking about. Bringing the HT or LT land, the amount of cost and resources required to get the voltage, a three-phase voltage at that level. That, let's say, if we break it down to two, those also pose huge problems. I would say cost is a huge problem, but right now, maybe in pockets it would be a problem where we have like a diffusion of certain segments of vehicles which would require a more expanded DC fast charging network. But overall, pan India, when it comes to highway, obviously it's going to be a big problem. We are not there yet. And in terms of whether forget about charging demand, like we're talking like getting electricity to that along the highway stretches, upgrading it. This is going to be I would say, a long game, so as to speak. Even within the two-wheeler, three-wheeler, we do see some evidence points to certain hotspots being created, even when you're talking two-wheelers and three-wheelers. And one feedback which we have got from in Delhi is that though the bus drivers, this is maybe anecdotal, though e-buses the drivers have been advised to space out the charging in such a way that they don't overload. Most of them apparently just come during the lunch break and then they seem to charge. So this is something that is these kind of situations do pose some challenges on the grid upgrade. But if you're looking to accelerate the EV transition and move beyond the two-wheeler, three-wheeler, let's face it, big picture, two-wheeler, three-wheeler in terms of our crude oil imports and GHG and air quality, it's a drop. I don't want to say drop in the bucket, but let's say a few drops in the bucket of when we talk big picture. So the meat of the game is in the buses, trucks, and cars. At some point, this grid
I think,
issue
yeah,
before a
Seshadri,
better
will come to that. Sorry to interrupt
Yeah.
here. We'll come on the bus part later on with different game altogether. I think I want to bring in Priyansh here. Priyansh, what is your take? Like, say, why you have been a user, very extensive user, you drive down on that. So what is your take? Where we are stuck, right? Policy, comment, or I think everybody's barking in the wrong side, right?
So let's break down the problem into multiple parts. So first, two-wheeler space, you most likely don't need a charging infrastructure. Most people, they charge at home. The usage is mostly in the city, not outside the city. When you come to three-wheelers or your light commercial vehicles, right? These are all designed for captive usage, where you're going from point A to point B, or you're moving around in a city in a fixed circuit. That they do not rely on public charging infrastructure. What we are crying, what the public is crying about here is about the four-wheeler infrastructure mainly. Even when you have the buses, it's not as if, hey, for example, a service operator is running a bus from point A to point B. There's a service operator point C who has public charging infrastructure for buses. Right now we are not at that stage yet. But we are at a stage where if someone is operating buses, they might as well look at and ensure that they get the charging for the buses to move around, right? the problem comes, the problem that even Chaitanya pointed out here is that there are too many players, and all of this is happening in the four-wheeler space where everything is public. Someone here also said that there is no data. Yes, there is no data because you have, I mean, I have more than 100 plus players on my phone. You know, I have 100 plus apps. But you are also right that you don't need these apps to travel from point A to point B. To bring some numbers and to bring some data into this context, the charging infrastructure in India, since the time I've been tracking in September 2022, has grown more than 10 times. This is only CCS2 and Type 2 public charging infrastructure. It has grown more than 10 times. The ease of travel for customers is also improving rapidly. I'm not saying that it is there at 100 yet. Previously, I'll give a short example and I'll wrap up my point. Bombay, Delhi, right? I have done this trip 9 times. The first 3 times I would do it via Vadodara, Ahmedabad, Udaipur, because that is where the charging infrastructure was. Now I can do it via the Delhi-Mumbai Expressway, even though there are not many reliable chargers on the expressway, but I can still get off the expressway, charge, and then get back on the expressway, right? This itself has cut down my travel time by 3.5 hours over 2 years. Now, when the expressway is fully built and when you have working charges on the expressway, that is when you will cut down the time significantly by another 3-4 hours. So that is how the transition I am seeing is going towards the availability of public charging infrastructure. That is a small point that I would like to make.
Got it. I think now, Vasudha, coming to you, I will rather going to toward this. Just want to get your sense. You have been looking at EV companies, right? And also you are looking at what you call the whole investment profile. So, what is your take? Like, say we are seeing globally investment in EV sector is little slowing down. Do you see the similar thing happening in India? And how do you break the whole model? Vasudha?
Yeah, sorry. I muted myself. Okay. So, yeah, no, I mean, I just want to comment quickly. I mean, most of the points have been covered on why this paradox exists and all of that. But essentially, I think it's just a matter of where is the demand and where is the supply. I think that's really where it all comes down to. Because right now, part of the anxiety is because we are used to seeing filling stations wherever we need them, right? That tension is never there. If I own an ICE vehicle, that tension is never there. So the transition suddenly to a vehicle where you need to find where it is going to be, etc. It's just a matter of and EVs, just a matter of where it is located, where demand is and where supply is, and there has been a mismatch between the two. So even as Priyansh said, there's been a 10x growth, and which is true, and I think that there is going to be more growth over the next few years. There's going to be a lot more charging stations. I think the main thing to look at, and this will also improve utilization, is to really locate it, very close to the where the utilization will happen or the use will happen. So, and EVs tend to be quite, I think the way the EV industry has grown, right, over the last several years, there has been use case based growth, in that sense that, two-wheelers used for deliveries have taken off at a different rate. Three-wheelers used for last mile or transport, last mile or public transport have taken off at a different rate. Buses have their own sort of growth cadence. So I think each of these use cases have grown in their own way, and that therefore means that the charging networks have to be integrated with those use cases. Given that we have had relatively a different scale of growth or slower scale of growth of the charging infrastructure, there has been this mismatch. I think this will get ironed out over the next few years. So I think overall, people, if they start to have more EVs in apartment complexes and they have those local charging stations or local chargers installed there, more and more apartment societies are going in that direction. For each use case, this problem will start to get solved, right? So I think that paradox is there because we are at an early stage of adoption, really. That's the way I see it. You want me to comment on the investment side?
Correct.
Okay. So, so I speak quite regularly with early and more growth stage, you can say, people, investors looking at Series A and above. And we discuss themes quite routinely, almost in every investor meeting that I have. There will be a talk about, which are the preferences that they have and how are they looking at it and so on. So, it's a composite of all of these conversations. But I think overall, what has, and my own view, and importantly, my own view on what I think why this has also played out this way. Essentially, we have seen more than $1 billion in funding raised in the last 3 years. On an average, at least $1 billion, right? There was I think it was 2021 or something, where we had that big TPG Rise deal into Tata Motors, where one deal was $1 billion and the rest of it was probably another 500 million or so. So that was a first breakthrough year in EV funding. But on an average, we've had about $1 billion in funding, right? Typically, the way the funding has flown, yes, in the initial 3 years, I think so far OEMs have had the lion's share of funding. More than 50-60% would be typically going to the OEMs. But I think that trend is now starting to sort of spread out a bit more, become a bit more diversified. So OEMs have taken the big share. Charging infrastructure from a private equity, and I speak only, for equity sources. I'm not talking about others, grants or lending or other sources. But broadly, when we look at equity flows into charging infrastructure, it has been fairly sporadic, right? And I'll give you the reasons. Just to give a data point from our own internal research, I think it was only about 3% of last year's funding, which was in that, which came into the charging side of things, of the overall funding. So you can tell that it's, probably the number in the year before was higher because of, one or two deals. There was probably a charge zone deal that raised a larger amount in that year. And so it's been somewhat sporadic and anecdotal, the kind of fewer deals. Now, the reasons for this, and from the equity investors' perspective, the first and most important thing is this paradox only, right? I mean, what stops them from looking at it is to say, oh, hey, adoption is happening in all of these areas, but then utilization of EV chargers is very less. And, what is the timeline, that they estimate that there will be greater utilization and therefore give them returns on their capital, right? So there is basically this mismatch between their investment timelines, which are typically 3 to 7 years, and their perceived expectation of when the EV chargers will become higher utilized. That's been one of the, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt here. So what you were saying is that the charging, while people want to expect, but because of paradox, they are not coming in. So just to, so basically there are 4 silos when it comes to EV. There's OEM, then there's what we call OEM in the hardware, software, everything. Sorry, in the vehicle and the hardware side. Then we have what we call software player, pure play software. Then we have battery swapping and charging. So of these 4, where do you think maximum traction happening in next 18 months?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's speaking for the broader industry. I think what we have seen and what investors tell me quite routinely is that, they are not so kicked about hardware, and that has been also the biggest, I would say, hurdle in overall getting funding into the EV ecosystem, which I've been putting my head down on that area for the last several years. Hardware has been a difficult area overall to raise funds in, except when there is very high level of differentiation technology, very sort of what you can say native development of differentiated technology by the company or the startup. Then it does sort of break that thing. But if you look at OEMs, chargers and charge point operators, and then software, see, the software would ideally look attractive to investors, no doubt about it. I think in India, frankly, if you look at the Indian VC ecosystem, they've had a long stretch now of looking at a lot of technology driven, so-called technology driven, all of which is in the none of this is really purely software. Whether you talk about food tech or edutech or any kind of tech, there is definitely a hardware or an offline element involved in India. You can't really build a purely software business. I would say that the software aspects would be attractive to investors, but then scalability comes into question, right? The thing with
So what do you mean by here? Like, say, when you say
Yeah.
software scalability, right? So what
Yeah.
is the market not so large for software play?
Yeah, exactly. The market is not perceived as very large. So, for instance, right now, I will give you a live example. We are working with a fleet company. They provide transportation services. Okay, they are not just EV. They have a mix of EV and ICE. They provide transportation services. If you look, and they have a fantastic AI-based software which will help optimize rides. Okay, optimize trips. Now,
Correct.
you can say that, and they provide this as a SaaS solution to enterprises. Now, if you look at the market size of that, that's much lesser as compared to fulfilling the trips, right? So anything, and this is true for the Indian market, the enterprise customers or even the average end consumer does not really pay for software, right? It's going to be very, very difficult. Now, Akhil spoke about BESCOM, right? BESCOM, it's great that you're doing that work, but however, it is going to be thin, in terms of what you take back. So I think there is that sort of paradox in in what investors expect and what this industry can deliver. So somewhere both have to come and meet in the middle to say, hey, we are okay with a little bit of hardware, or we're okay with certain things, that we're not going to be purist about only software.
I got it. Sorry to stop you here. Akhil,
No.
bring you in. Akhil, just want to on what Vasudha said. So, do you think that it is possible to build a $100 million revenue company in pure software play in EV charging space?
In India, no, to be very honest. Globally, yes. I'm brutally honest about it, right? I think few things, the way investors should look at the space. Market ultimately is a function of consumption that is happening in India, right? Number of vehicle sales that's going to happen. We keep, I think the government has a number saying 30 million, 50 million vehicles by 2030. I don't think that's going to happen, right? Like the slowdown is happening already. So now, if that reduces at a macro level, then consumption is going to go reduce as well. And what that means is there's going to be, like all the hardware charger companies, the friction points is going to be there is, look, you're not going to continuously pump hardware into the market. There's going to be a saturation. People are not going to buy 1 lakh chargers every year, right? That will eventually come down. Then there'll be a stagnancy because
as the graph also, we can see that it is declining, right? Penetration is declining. Yeah.
So we're not going to hit that 50, 30 million target of EVs on ground in the next 5 years. That will trickle down to number of chargers that's going to be set up. That's going to trickle down to the amount of energy that's going to be consumed. That's going to trickle down to, okay, what kind of, what's the value that you can extract using software? So that's the way you got to look at it. It all boils down to how many users are there in this country who's consuming through vehicles, through EV. Simple.
So, I mean, here again, your view, like say as a hardware, what you call battery, everything else, we are doing it. Do you think it is possible to create 100 million company in India, or is what Akhil is saying that you have to probably build for the world, right? And if you build for the world, how you account for what you call all the challenges in exporting, compliances, quality? What is your take?
Right. I think typically for us to, if you had to build $100 million company in hardware, right? I think it's still possible, at least in India, given that the growth rate of the market in itself. I mean, in various spaces, right? Be it motor controllers or electric vehicle chargers. But I think if you look at the hardware supply chain in our country, 80% of the supply chain comes from China, Taiwan, and it's imported. There's very less innovation that happens, and one of the core challenges in the charging infrastructure space is that most of the chargers today that are deployed, the outer casing is of course built by the local makers, but the internal hardware is exported, especially the rectifiers. And I think there has been lack of innovation around that space. So if we had to build $100 million company in the hardware space, at least in the EV charging industry, I think it it could come off from a charging manufacturer or charging OEM that could not
Okay.
just supply in the country, but also outside the
Okay.
country.
So, okay, I will stop you here and ask Sumit. So you are from policy side, and now I think I will have the little play with all three policy guys. We have three policy people here, right? So what do you think that will take trigger, right? Do we blame all the time the vehicles, the institutions, or the manufacturer for not innovating, or the policies are what you call taking us a different direction? And if you see the graph on the screen right now, we can see the EV penetration after going to 5% suddenly dropped to 3.98, right, for 2024. Little bit drop has happened here. So what is your take? What is happening here in the policy side?
So I have 3 points here, which perhaps will add inputs. So first is, see what are the trends in India. One is EV has always, I mean, for in India, EV is a kind of a bottom-up penetration. We have been the heroes of EV are basically tier 2 cities where we have two-wheelers and three-wheelers who have caught the space compared to four-wheelers. But at the same time, there was an increasing urbanization. When we talk about urbanization, personal mobility for rising percentage of nuclear families have increased. And that is what is happening, that we have now people living in rented apartments. So we have difficulty setting up fixed charging systems near to in the rented apartment because landlords and all, they are not ready to set those up. Parking spaces, there are no designated parking spaces. So what
No,
I'm
but
trying to say, one is
yeah, no,
on
that's the reality.
the way
Yes.
the demographic dividend has changed. Number one, on the policy side, see, like when we talk about the policy side, the policies have been pretty supportive. If we compare it with China, Shailesh, China EV market is heavily subsidized. We are not that much subsidized. In policies have been kind of driving the demand, driving the supply. But at the same point of time, there is lot of innovation to happen, lot of value to be added from in terms of uh, new ecosystems like swapping of batteries, like having some new ways through which we can increase the penetration in four-wheelers. Because right now all the growth is happening on the two-wheeler and three-wheeler, and that is what I would like to mention, that this is important from the policy side.
Okay.
Some
So Sumit,
standardization work has
probably yeah, again, I think so. Sheshadri, like Sumit was talking, I just want to go very specific. Like say policy, my belief is, I will show you a different screenshot. They say no, is a picture of a very heavy bird, right? So correlation is not causation. Whenever we think of this policy, so is the policy really geared when we're seeing that what is happening? Do you think that the EV adoption is happening because of policy or despite policy?
Uh, okay, I'm going to play the diplomat, and then like I would say, I echo the previous comment on being the bottom up, which is let's say we're talking the two-wheeler where we largely don't need that much of a public EV charging infrastructure, so as to speak, a regular socket and with enough protection will do. As far as this policy, the correlation causation angle, it is very. I mean, we don't. It's a philosophical discussion, I would say. But rather than putting weight on whether it's correlate or causative, but there is enough consensus of global evidence on they tend to go well. They tend to co-evolve. At least even spatially speaking, geographically speaking, they tend to co-evolve because of they are contingent. Like especially when you're talking, say, four-wheelers, I would say there is some we could tease out some strand of information on. There is a strong, I don't want to say strong, but let's say there is some relationship, association, positive association, to mildly put it, there
Got you.
between EV and EV infrastructure. I would
Got
say
you.
that's where it stops. Yeah.
So I think Chaitanya, so I will give two points, right? So one is that majority of EV adoption in India has happened under, as rightly people pointed on, the lower side, which is three-wheeler. And all of it came from lead acid battery, right? Which had no subsidy. And second thing, after the FAME 2 went away, the vehicle price dropped. And third is the guys who earlier got the FAME subsidy, Hero Electric and Okinawa, both have practically disappeared from the market. And again, they were driven by FAME. So what do you think? Whether the policy is really helping us or policy has really muddled up because it has got the player who should not have been there to get in the space, build it up, right? Rather than making good quality vehicles, people thought that they can use the policy subsidies and just being a good trader. So, what is your take on here? Like, say, where is this part will solve this policy conundrum?
Okay, so I mean, I don't think there is any question that when you give subsidies for EVs, EV growth will grow. I mean, especially at the beginning when there is a price differential between EVs and ICEVs, and the market for EVs was non-existent and the economies of scale were not coming into play. Subsidies were, and to some extent, based on the PM E-Drive scheme continue to be essential, especially for specific segments, which are still very nascent today, like freight is very nascent today. And therefore, the PM E-Drive scheme has allocations for subsidies for freight. The question here is, of course, you throw enough money at anything, people will buy it, yes. But
Correct.
how do you judiciously use your money, your public monies and investments, given that you are a developing country, you don't have as much money. Someone was saying that, yes, the EV market in China was heavily subsidized. China, US, Europe, if you see the kind of subsidies they've given, ours is like not even a fraction of that. And despite that, I do think the policies in India have managed to sort of evolve. They continue to evolve over time, which is a good thing, which means that they are taking in inputs from the ground and they're changing. Just the EV charging guidelines and standards, which the Ministry of Power first launched sometime in December 2018 or something, I think that's undergone some 7-8 revisions. They are regularly revising it. There was a draft battery swapping policy, which did not get passed because the industry did not want it. So from the policy side, I think everything, I mean, it's been a decent job. I would not say that it's been like an absolute mess. Of course, yes, someone said in the comments, the Okinawa Hero Electric thing was because of the whole localization issues and whether they were eligible for the subsidies, which kind of, it was exactly when that whole thing came out that they suddenly dropped in their shares. And any new ecosystem, you're going to have players, and they will over time sort of be weeded out if they are not up to the mark. I don't think that has anything to do with policy.
So great. I think, yeah. So I will still trying to be devil's advocate and try to bring. So I just want to question, this is a big, large question. We see maximum adoption happening in two-wheeler, three-wheeler, but still we don't have any standards. Or we are the only country which has 3 standards as a one standard, right? Nobody has a standard means one. Standard doesn't mean have 3 things, right? Type 6, type 7, and multiple other things coming out. So what are the challenges we are having here? What is your take?
Standards are multiple. You can have multiple standards. I mean, you have
That was the
CEEW,
point.
you have CHAdeMO, you have the American one. So, I mean, you do have different standards.
Standard can only be one, right? Because if you have 5 standards, then obviously industry won't come together. So why in India we are struggling for not to have a standard, especially
in which segment? Again, your question is because
Two-wheeler,
four-wheelers, it's fairly clear, right?
yeah, that's
CCS
global.
is one.
Yeah,
Huh.
CCS. But why in two-wheeler, three-wheeler, GPT, type 6, type 7? Why is that so?
So, I mean, I'm sure there are maybe someone else. Okay, I'll give my 2 cents and then I'll let others comment. I think a couple of reasons, right? One is, firstly, I think Priyanshu, someone said, most two-wheelers are charged at home. And the minute they are charged at home, they don't need to worry about standardizing. Standards like good quality standards or whatever, your international standards based connectors and all are more expensive. So they are going to add to the cost of your vehicle, and your two-wheelers and all are very price sensitive. And I mean, even why just the connectors, like charging connectors, right? You can even talk about the batteries. Like batteries are they're not the BMS is not as high grade, the thermal cooling is not as high grade in two-wheeler batteries. All of this is to sort of optimize costs. So there is a cost element, and this has not been a real pain point for consumers element in the two-wheeler space. Most two-wheelers come with sort of a portable battery cable as well, which means that as long as it is standardized on the wall side.
Yeah, that is very different. We'll come to that part. So
Hmm.
I get that. So I think I'll
Hmm.
stop here. So probably I'll ask more of Amin. Amin, as a manufacturer, do you think that the standard is a problem? Like say what Chaitanya is saying, it is not such a problem for the two-wheeler guys. They really don't bother. What is your take?
So I agree with Chaitanya on when charging happens at home, they don't really follow the standard. Standardization comes into play. Like for example, in four-wheelers, if you have CCS2, you can publicly charge anywhere. So standardization it becomes important for the user only if it is publicly accessible and there is a value proposition. Now I might use Chigori or an SBS2 connector on my battery pack, but as long as he's able to plug into a socket, great. But when I'm offering fast charging services, right? If I'm building a public infrastructure, the customer will want a standardization so that he can ultimately go and charge on a Ether station or a VDAT station. For public charging station, standardization might be important, but for home charging, it's not. Yeah, but of course,
So what you're saying is Chetan is right that probably for two-wheeler, three-wheeler, it's still not so critical, right? So Vasudha, do you think I'm now trying to get Vasudha also. See, we have a little less time, a lot of panelists, so want to get more as many views as possible. So Vasudha, as a banker, do you see any of your companies grappling with the standard issues? Do you think that is a challenge or there's not a challenge?
I think, I mean, we have worked very, very selectively in this space, but we of course observed the changes. I don't think, to a very large extent, standardization across vehicle types, is really that big of an issue. I think the main thing is to get scalable businesses built in every segment, and the good thing and the bad thing, both sides of the coin within the Indian market is that it is possible to create a very large and attractive business. I mean, full stack business. We've talked about that earlier. But in some sense, if you can build a full stack business focusing on even one or two of these use cases, I think it's possible to do that. Where standards really, I have not heard that is really that big of a challenge. Yeah.
Understood. So that's good. I think Priyansh, you as a end user, what is your take? I understand you do more in the car side, but do you think that the standard has challenge or is okay?
No, the four-wheeler space thankfully has everyone has moved to CCS2. You just had a few fleet cars that were on a different standard. But now even the fleet has changed that and adopted the CCS2 model. So uh, I mean, in four-wheeler space, thankfully, I mean, the OEMs probably got together, or it was the regulatory bodies, whoever, bless their soul. And thank you for having standards in four-wheelers.
Got it. Thanks. So I think we are almost getting closer to session. I will also send a different question, which we are saying. Like say, I have been, Malaba is a very open and dumb question looks like also that between AC 22 kilowatt fast charging versus DC 30 kilowatt fast charging, why we have not gone for AC, what you call 22 kilowatt charging? Because A, it is much cheaper. The AC 22 kilowatt charge hardly 50,000-60,000 rupees. You don't need a very special provision, no safety, nothing else, right? In 1 hour, you get almost 150 kilometers. So what is the challenge? Where we are stuck? Well, so I will start from you. I mean, you are talking of the OBC cost. So what is your take? Yeah.
right. So see, in any building today, if you have to have 22 kilowatt of energy, if it's a four-floor building, you can get a total allotment of 24 kilowatt. Now, if you want to have 22 kilowatt of AC charging offering to your customer, you still have to go and get a grid upgrade done, right? When you are actually getting a
One
grid,
second, 1 second. Why grid upgrade? Because see, we are already getting 220 kilowatt power, and we have what you call 35 amperes. So we are getting 7 kilowatt per phase. So on three phase,
Right.
I'm getting 22 kilowatt, right? So if in any large building complex, which is a three phase energy, 22 kilowatt is the kind of given, right?
Right. it could be given, but in terms of, so the one point is, of course, your point of the large building alone, but how many of those could you actually have spare 22 kilowatt available? That's the first thing. The second thing is the costing front, right? Of course, the chargers for 22 kilowatt might cost you 40-50,000 rupees. It's easier for the consumer, but for the OEM, the differential cost for an onboard charger for a 3.3 or a 7.5 kilowatt would be 40-45,000 rupees. But if you're doing it the same for a 22 kilowatt, it could go onwards towards 1.5 lakhs.
No, 1 second. So your 7 kilowatt is 45K and 22 kilowatt is 1.2K, 1.2L. Is that the difference?
No,
What is the here? If everybody on 7.4, let us say everybody is moving to 7.4, and from 7.4 we go to 22 kilowatt, what is the delta?
If you're for the OEM itself, it's going to be about 1 lakh in terms of the hardware cost, but it's going to reduce for the customer, right? But when the consumer is buying a car, and if there's a delta of 75,000 rupees, Indian consumer will always pick something that's on the lower side.
No, but if you're buying a 20, MG motor of 27 lakh car, right? The point is because the DC is not installed very heavily, right? Because all DCs are, and DC charger is around 5 lakh and AC is just 50,000 rupees. I'm just kind of being being a devil's advocate here.
No, I understand.
What's your take on this?
As a consumer, if I'm opting for a 22 kilowatt car, the first question is how many of the places will I actually get a 22 kilowatt AC charging availability? Today, like Priyant said, 7.5 is widely available. So end of the day, the problem that it's solving, if I have 5 places where I can charge for 22 kilowatt versus 30 places in 7.5, I would pick 7.5 and a lesser cost on the OEM on the vehicle itself.
Okay. Let me retwist it. Let us say government gives subsidy for 22 kilowatt charger, right? OBC. They say, okay, we'll give you the subsidy, 50,000 rupees subsidy, so that it becomes a 7.4. Rather than giving subsidy on the DC charger, what will work better? Chaitanya and Seshadri, your take on this? Like say, if you have to give subsidy on, say, OBC charger versus giving subsidy on DC charger, what do you think? What will work better, adoption-wise?
Subsidy on OBC goes to the OEM.
Correct.
Subsidy on chargers.
In DC also is to OEM only. So, I'm just saying, or to rephrase the question to even to Amin, if the cost of the car, let us say there is no cost increase, is the same 22 kilowatt. So, what will be better, 22 kilowatt system or a 30 kilowatt DC system? Which will be better?
I'd just like to add one thing. I mean, yeah, go ahead and then
go on, Sumit.
Sorry.
Go on.
So, see, from the grid perspective, what happens? There is a sudden bump which is there if you go for a high grade charging, and that is a big challenge. Grids are not meant that way, and it's not only the EV charging which is happening; it is other charge things which are also getting charged. So it is a heavy load. Number one. So that is one thing. And in India, whatever is affordable is scalable. So if you have a heavy cost differential, it will not be very, very helpful. So having a system, not DC but AC, will definitely be adding value. I mean, AC is something we should go with because DC suddenly gives you a surge and creates sag and swells within the distribution system. So it will not be very helpful from the grid perspective.
Right, I agree with Sumit if the application is more for a personal use, right? And if it's for a personal use where you're setting up a charger, then of course AC charger makes sense. But the point is, in an event where you don't have the grid availability in a building, if you are spending 4-5 lakhs on a grid upgrade and then setting up a 22 kilowatt EV charging, then of course you have certain wait time to charge your vehicle, which will be about 1.5 hours or so. If you do the same for a DC charging, then you can reduce the time, right? And the thing is, all of us are speaking from a perspective of what's good for the grid and what not. But the consumer eventually wants to save time and money, right? That's what they look at, the value creation that comes to them.
No, the point. So again, I think coming to
I would like to add, Shailesh, one point from the consumer's point of view. Honestly, I don't care if it is a 22 kilowatt AC charger or a 30 kilowatt DC charger. The point that you're making is in 1 hour, I'm getting 150 kilometers of range. I don't care how my car is being charged, right? From the CPU's point of view, it is likely a lot cheaper to have 30 kilowatt DCs, because what happens is that they don't have to be dependent on the car. When right now in the space, given how the market situation is, if you have 22 kilowatt OBCs, I mean, you don't have 22 kilowatt OBCs, so there are no charging
Don't have. Yeah, correct.
possibilities there, right?
Correct.
What we are also ignoring in this delta, it is not just the OBC. You also have to upgrade the charger hardware that is present, right?
Okay.
And in some cases, for example, I have done Bombay, Hyderabad. This was in Feb 2023. There I spent close to 4 hours at a 15 kilowatt DC charger.
4 hours.
4 hours at a 15 kilowatt DC charger to charge my MG ZSEV, which is a 50 unit pack. So, and I was charging literally from 0 to 100. So point is that low capacity DC chargers also exist. And with DC, the one advantage is that there is lower, what do you say, conversion losses. When you're charging, because that DC power can go and sit directly in the battery pack. With AC, you have to convert the current. So those are some of the small points.
Got it.
I think on the one thing I would like to add on the conversion part, right? Essentially, what a DC charger does is it takes AC current, converts it to DC, and supplies it to your battery. If you're giving 22 kilowatt of AC, essentially the OBC on the car is doing the same thing. The efficiency depends on the hardware that's, either the rectifiers that are there in the OBC or the charger.
Got it. No, it's very, and so Chaitanya, any point to add? You want to add anything?
I mean, I think the DC 30 and AC 22 comparison is also not correct, because today you can charge at much faster rates. So so probably building on what Priyansh is saying, and if we're looking at ultimately fast charging for the consumer, yes, we have to wait for OEMs to sort of build up to 22 kilowatts and then hope that, at the end of the day, I think AC is primarily being seen as something that can be done at home, because if you're charging outside, you want to do it as fast as possible. And DC is going to be able to deliver faster and faster rates as charging rates of batteries also improves. And if you're charging at home, then this whole grid issue of, you have to sort of upgrade your transformer and all, because it's the total connected power that actually matters. And so then the minute you add like 22 kilowatt chargers, you're suddenly blowing up. Like usually a 3 BHK has a 10 kilowatt connection at home. So then if you are adding 22 kilowatts of another connected load to that, they're going to ask you to upgrade your connection as an apartment also. And so that becomes just very logistically difficult. So I think from an OEM side of them not having OBCs, from the home charging perspective of 22 kilowatts could work only for community charging, not for personal charging possibly today. If you have big campuses and you set up 22 kilowatt chargers, that could still be good. But DC will still prevail for public charging, and it'll be faster and faster rates of DC, and 30 kilowatt DC is no longer the scale at which we're talking about, right? So yeah.
Got it. Understood. So I think we almost run out of time. So pretty interesting, and we have much more interesting chat, I sense. There's a heavy discussion going on the chat, and I think it would be great to have one or two people also to make comment. So I think we almost think so. So would like to, if any of you have to make a closing comment, what will take to kickstart EV charging? So we have done a whole report, a 132-page report, which Malika has done. We will share and will circulate to all of you at the end of this webinar. So probably we'll start with Chaitanya, if you have any comment to make on this. And then we'll probably also invite Lithian, somebody from Lithian Chaitanya, to you.
Sorry, are we giving space to the panel? I mean, the commenters, or
No. I'm saying any closing comments, comments on this, like say, what do you think, what is needed to kickstart EV charging in India?
I think we really need to better understand how EV charging utilization patterns are going to fall out and start developing sort of very use case specific charging. I think one way of planning for public charging, especially in cities and all, has been to look at how fleets move, ensure that fleets are the first off-takers for these CPOs, and then any sort of residual retail customers that come will just be a bonus. That is the only way to ensure viability today, and it is increasingly happening as well. So I think we really need to kind of start seeing those volumes grow and have that sort of synergy happening between fleet operators and CPOs to ensure some viability for the chargers that come up and to right size our charging networks. We ourselves at WRI are actually revising what we are seeing as the estimates of public charging required, because previously the thought was even 50% of three-wheeler chargers may charge in public domain. But you find that in smaller cities like Lucknow and all, most of them have home charging, even three-wheeler guys. And so the amount of people that are actually going to use public charging and when they're going to use it, I think we really need to right size that as well and provide our public charging networks accordingly. So yeah, just 2 points.
Thanks. Sumedh?
So I think there are 2, 3 things. One is like India is a unique market and it's have its own development challenges. So one thing for urban cities, I see we have to focus on first mile, last mile, and the public transport. So whatever the solutions which can help us to reach the public stations, public metro stations, and we have very established charging stations there, will definitely help urban cities to unclog themselves as well as take the things forward. For the urban areas or semi-urban, for the rural areas or semi-urban areas, I see, 2 things. One is we should have fleets, which like e-commerce fleets. If we can focus on them, we can focus on the use cases which have food chains which can be taken care forward with public charging stations or private charging stations, then definitely it add value. And the last point I wanted to make was that all the public charging stations are high-grade public charging stations, high-rated public charging station. There can be DC, that can be AC, but for home, less AC charging stations will definitely be something which we have to promote and take forward. Yeah.
Got it. And Seshadri, your view?
On EV, so let me at some point we have to phase out of the subsidy reliant approach. The only way to make that possible is to also look at the financial sustainability of charging infrastructure. And this requires, I think, I don't want to call it chicken and egg, but I would rightly also add to Chaitanya's previous point that right sizing the battery will sort of cascade into charging how the infrastructure rollout happens. The manifest problems we see in terms of fragmentation, I don't want to call it fragmentation, I would call it somewhere between chaos and a little bit, very fast to move. I would say right sizing the battery would be a much important angle to look at, though we are talking about infrastructure. People tend to overestimate their requirements for long distance travel. We cannot size the infrastructure for the tail end of the distribution, which happens few days a year. We have to look at the median and the nominal, and some sort of let's say without the subsidies, whether we cannot entirely drop the subsidies, but the question of AC, DC, even within DC, there are so many levels possible. For the time being, we should have the foresight should be is that what sort of a future infrastructure we want, and that should dictate the Lego pieces we put place today, so that we are building up the pieces, because we cannot just we have to measure twice and cut once. That's apparently seems to be we are learning on the go. I would say continue subsidies up to a certain point and let prioritize the fleets, including the government fleets as well, which includes the public transit. Those will be the target market. At some point, come up to the truck. That's when we are, let's say, truck and four-wheelers to an extent. That's when the whole question of what do we do for highway charging infrastructure, whether we go the subsidy route or whether we go the captive consumer road. So I think we have to give another 3 to 5 years for this things to shake out, for clear technology trends. I also anticipate a lot of consolidation. All these small players, I think there is going to be a lot of market consolidation, acquisition. Then the picture will be much clearer as to which direction are we going? Like this question of bigger battery versus more chargers, I think this will need some more time to shake out when we have like an informed answer. That will be my sort of a closing comment on this. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Vasudha.
Yeah, sorry, I was in mute. No, I do. I mean, I really feel that we need that consolidation of, one from a consumer perspective. We need a one view of the one view of all the charging stations, which I think everyone from Google to players in the industry are working on that. I think that will really be a game changer. Ultimately, whatever we say on policy or funding, everything is dependent on customer utilization or greater customer adoption. So while policy has had its own sort of ups and downs, you can say that broadly the direction is forward and upward. So we really need to be able to catalyze more equity into the space. We need to be sensitive to customer needs and see how we can build solutions aimed directly and specifically on customer needs, and then use that to drive in more equity into the space and then kind of grow step by step from there. So yeah, that would be my comment.
Okay, thanks, Amin.
Right. I think personal charging, I think, will always AC chargers is going to grow drastically. The 3.3 and the 7.5 for home charging. For DC charging, I believe that the charge point operators need to realize that deploying a public charger sounds quite fancy when we want to give access to a consumer. But on a business standpoint, charger break-evens today with financiers in play take about good 2.5 to 3 years. And these break-evens only happen based on the amount of electricity a DC charger actually dispenses. I think, I agree with Vasudha, having a single view that will increase utilization on these chargers and help them break even, and bringing this together could become a model where you have normal investors invest into charging infrastructure, knowing that they'll get profitable after a point in time, and have it organically grow, because subsidies can only help you till an extent.
Got it. And so, Priyansh.
Yeah. So yeah, I would say that subsidies need not be given to CPOs. Subsidies need not be given to OEMs to increase their OBCs. If subsidies have to be given, they have to be given to discoms to ensure that the power is reliably available, to ensure that there is, if, for example, in the comments, right, there was one piece where we were like, in Gujarat, you can get 100 kilowatt LT connection very easily. Other states can't do that, right?
Very interesting.
So
Yes.
if discoms are given that kind of subsidy, it means that OEMs or CPOs who already have private money, private capital, they will want to invest in the hardware, they will want to set up the chargers. And if I see 100, 120 kilowatt chargers on the expressways, I'll want to travel more. Or similarly, if someone wants to set up a fleet operation, let's say in Rajasthan or in Jodhpur, they know that they can get 120 kilowatt chargers very easily. So the downtime is lower. So that is how I think, if there is subsidies to be played, it should be played out in this way.
Got it. No, that's very interesting comment you made, that there no subsidy being given. Now I would like to invite Sudhir Nayak. Sudhir, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, so Sudhir is founder of Sun Fuel. They provide EV chargers at a very luxury locations. So thanks, Sudhir, and you are very active. So I said, why not, Sudhir, to give some comment as a CPO and as your experience. Yeah, happy to hear your views.
Awesome. So most charging is happening at home. Everyone understands that. Every car comes with that 7 kilowatt wall box, which people have been installing, and eventually humanity has always found out ways to augment infrastructure, be it undersea cables for internet or the fueling stations when we transition from horse carts to cars. So we will find out ways to augment our grid and have that charger which comes along with the car, like a laptop charger, to get installed somewhere and do home charging in the near future, I do believe. But having said that, the DC charging game on the highway, which is the most important piece of this puzzle, which needs to be solved, one can't be done without the OEMs, because one, they are the biggest beneficiaries of a good charging infrastructure. And anywhere in the world where there is scaled up and high quality charging infrastructure, it is OEM backed, whether it is Tesla chargers or Electrify America, which is a Volkswagen company, or Ionity, which is a conglomerate of Volkswagen, BMW, and Mercedes. So in India also, the charging player who, one, gets the OEM skin in the game, and two, has a last mover advantage, which means moves last with the biggest charges. Yes, so like in business, you have first mover advantage. There is the last mover advantage as well. iPhone was the last smartphone. Facebook was the last social network. So the player who moves in with the biggest and the best chargers, when the dust has settled, is gonna win, and especially the one who can get the OEMs involved. Those are my 2 cents on this.
Oh, very nice. I think very good insights. One, I think really take out from what Priyan said, that the give subsidy to discoms. I totally agree. I think getting a 100 LT connection is the biggest challenge, right? For any CPU you ask. And same way he said, the probably is market will be decided by the guys who will enter last. So probably was the to take a note of that. And with that, thanks a lot to all of you for spending the 1.5 hours for this session. Really appreciate that. And I hope we all learned a lot from this thing. We'll share the report also by end of today. And once again, thanks a lot. Have a great day ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shailesh and Climate Angels.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
If I may, sorry, I just have like one request now that we are talking charging.
Yeah.
I hope it's okay with Climate Angels.
Sure.
As a non-profit policy, we are just trying to exactly collate and solicit inputs from different stakeholders exactly on this highway charging infrastructure, what size, where do we want, and all this. This is more of a feedback to provide to NITI. There is no commercial or any other interest in that. I really appreciate it. The survey is going to take a few minutes, and there won't be any names or emails even asked. And all the participants here, as a broad stroke, will be duly acknowledged. I just want to assure that. Thank you. I'm just pasting it in the message box on Zoom. Thank you.
Awesome. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Yeah.
We'll send it across to everyone. We'll share this.
Please. Yeah.
Okay. Great.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
a lot,
you.
guys.
Bye.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Yeah.